The Lancang and the Mekong River, two different names, are one river. In China, it's called the Lancang, but in Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, it is known as the Mekong. Well, the Lancang-Mekong is one of the world's most important waterways. Sharing its resources is an international issue. And on Monday, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang wrapped up the third Lancang-Mekong Cooperation meeting in Beijing. So what were the topics on the table? How is development and climate change affecting Mekong countries? And what role can China play? To talk about these issues, I'm joined in the studio by Professor John Gong from the University of International Business and Economics, and by satellite from Singapore by Chan Venerith, President of Cambodia's Asian Vision Institute. And joining us from Bangkok is Professor Jeffrey Towson, host of Jeff's Asia Tech class. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. So, John, actually, this was first put forward in 2014 at the ASEAN Summit meeting.
Right. The
mechanism of cooperation along the Lancang-Mekong rivers. But why there was an idea in the first place of cooperation along the river?
Right. Well, this is actually prompted by Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, and I think the primary purpose is, of course, to facilitate at a very fundamental level regional integration and cooperation at economics level. And in particular, these 6 countries sharing one river running through them. So naturally, there would be a sort of a dialogue or cooperation mechanism under which parties involved can talk to each other, can look at different aspects, discuss issues, and I think this issue is particularly important, a little bit different in terms of the number of dams that have been built along the river. There are some dams in China, practically every country in this group, barring, I think, Vietnam, have all talked about, barring Myanmar, have all talked about and the process of building dams. So, this is an issue that they have to be coordinated when so many dams and hydro projects are involved across different countries.
And Venerith, what is your assessment of the mechanism, how it has been working?
The Lancang-Mekong Cooperation mechanism is one of the many mechanisms in the Mekong. Actually, China is quite a latecomer in this sub-regional cooperation. Follow, Japan, India, South Korea, and the United States, which they all form their own initiative to engage the Mekong regions. So, even though the Lancang-Mekong Cooperation mechanism is a latecomer in this complex, dynamic region, but it is one of the prominent mechanism due to resources and the practical cooperation on the ground. And China takes a very active and responsible leadership role in promoting regional cooperation to deal with different development issues, from infrastructure to public health to climate change to water resource management. So this is a kind of very dynamic sub-regional mechanism which is led by China in cooperation with other lower Mekong countries.
What is the importance of the Mekong region involving those countries that you mentioned, and why U.S., Japan are also interested in this? China is interested because, of course, we share the same river, although it's called different names in different countries.
Well, we need to look at it from different dimensions, from geopolitical dimension, because this is considered as a China strategic backyard. So this major external power come to play in this region to somehow to check the rising power of China. From economic dimension, of course, this Mekong region is part of Southeast Asia, which is emerging economies. We see the dynamic economic development in this Mekong sub-region, and it is well connected with the 2 Asian giants, China and India. Just between these 2 Asian giants, so it has great potential, economic potential, including market, infrastructure development, and connectivity. And of course, it's to some extent a cultural corridor. Because of the India engagement, this Mekong, through cultural corridor. China also have cultural interests, and to some extent, South Korea and Japan also have certain element of cultural cooperation with the Mekong country.
Jeffrey, what do you think of the bigger picture? It seems there are geopolitics at play. Economic cooperation is also part of it. Why there was so much attention focusing on this part of the world? Of course, we understand most of the Mekong countries are also ASEAN members.
Right. I mean, there's the bigger Asia story, which is, it's as cool and interesting an economic story you'll find is sort of the development and the integration of Asia. So you're seeing goods, people, capital, data increasingly moving back and forth between various countries like China, Southeast Asia, within Southeast Asia. And there's so many people that live in this region. You're talking about 1/3 of the human race lives in this region. Even the intertrade within this region is now greater than trade with the other parts of the world. So there's just this huge sort of event we're witnessing of the integration of Asia across really lots of dimensions. And within that, the Southeast Asia region is kind of an important aspect of that right now between China, the U.S., Japan, and some other things.
And of course, 2020 is no ordinary year for all the people in the world. COVID-19 has changed a lot of things. Jeffrey, how do you think the Mekong countries or the ASEAN countries in general are coping with COVID? How they are handling that challenge?
Well, if you look at the numbers, which, it's hard to know what the numbers really mean, how many are being reported, how many are being tested, but at least in Thailand, where I am, in most of these countries, are giving you roughly the same story, which is things seem to be relatively quiet. Economic and social life is pretty much back to normal. Nobody's flying across borders, but within most countries like Thailand, everything's pretty much open. People are walking around. It seems like Asia is coming out of this first, at least for now, and then, we'll see if things resurge, which I think is what everyone's worried about right now. But it's been,
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Obviously, if you look at what Premier Li talked about in terms of, the coordination, the commission, COVID and public health was a clear, significant issue within that this time. And that's, suddenly this commission, the Mekong River, it's a lot about public health in a way that it wasn't 2 years ago.
Yeah. And Vanners, do you agree that basically the Mekong countries have been doing a pretty good job containing this virus?
Yes, by and large, the Mekong country have mitigated, contained the spread of the virus or pandemic outbreak quite well compared with other countries in the region, let's say maritime Southeast Asia. So mainland Southeast Asia is quite the situation is quite under control, which is thanks to the joint collaboration, information sharing, cross-border control, and so on. So that's very important, I think, this kind of coordination and information sharing.
But we understand probably this virus won't be brought into control unless there is a vaccine working for all of us. And this year's meeting, China announced its plan that it will give Mekong countries priority access to COVID-19 vaccine. Of course, Chinese vaccine versions when it's ready. Why did China want to do that, John?
Well, I think there's no doubt in my mind that the set of developing countries will be the first wave of countries that will receive that kind of help from China. And in particularly in this case, because these countries some of these countries share contiguous borders with China. So that actually it's in China's interest to help mitigating the situation over there. And also, for countries like Cambodia,
there are flow of people and money between them.
Exactly, the exchanges of human exchanges and trade is a huge amount between these countries and China. So I think we would like to help these countries, of course, but also at the other end, I think it works in our own interest to have to see a sort of a mitigated picture in these countries.
And Vanners, what do these Mekong countries think about accepting China's vaccines? Because, of course, we understand there probably is a competition in the world on who will get the first vaccines available and who they should provide for.
Well, I think Mekong countries as well as ASEAN member countries and China share a common vision and common objective which is the vaccine should be a common public goods, a global public goods. And the recent statement of Premier Li Keqiang that give kind of certain privilege or priority to the Mekong countries, I think, as previous speaker mentioned, because of geographical proximity and our human connectivity from tourists to business traveler and so on. So perhaps immediate neighbor, the Mekong country as an immediate neighbor of China, so that China give more priority and advantage. But from our perspective, this vaccine should be a common global public goods, and this is shared with, together with China.
Is it that you prefer Chinese providing Mekong countries with vaccines, or is there any other alternatives you would consider that accepting all versions when they are available?
I think it's open to all versions as long as it's available. For instance, Vietnam already signed a deal with Russia when it comes to vaccines. But of course, I think all the Southeast Asian countries welcome those vaccines, especially the Mekong. I think Cambodia and others would welcome the vaccine produced by China.
And John, of course, there is the question of the capacity of production. To come up with a huge production capacity in a month is not easy. And probably China is the only country, if not the only, among the very few countries that have that capabilities. But it is still a big challenge for China to provide all people with vaccines. Let alone China has a huge population. Why China should give other nations vaccines first?
Well, first of all, I cast some doubt to frame this as a global public good. I mean, vaccine is expensive. It's not cheap at all. I don't think it's going to be...
You think it is a business?
I don't think it's going to be offered for free on a massive scale. Right now, there are basically 7 vaccines out there right now, getting to the 3rd wave of clinical trials. 3 from America, 3 in China, and 1 is in the UK, right? And then there's the issue of, as you mentioned, the production on a massive scale for these vaccines, catering to such a large population. And it's a tall order. I don't think it's going to be that easy, and it's not going to be cheap for sure. So I think in China's case, fortunately, we have a very strong government, and I think at least 2 of the vaccines actually are produced by state-owned companies, right? So, these companies typically operate under the public interest banner, and certainly, costs can be contained, and that these companies are not going to make an obscene profit from these products. So I think, that's a good thing. And another advantage is that I think China has the production capacity, very easily mobilize resources to quickly rush to production. I think it's very critical.
So you don't agree that this is China's vaccine diplomacy to win hearts and minds of the Southeast Asian nations?
Well, I think it's not just to win hearts, and it's just about saving people's lives, right? I mean, a lot of millions and millions of people are at stake here, lives are at stake. So, to the extent possible, of course, China is willing to extend a helping hand to help these people, to help these countries. But, to term it as sort of a vaccine diplomacy, I have a second thought about this. I mean, it's not really driven by a utilitarian motivation here. I think it's mostly motivated by desire to save people's lives. Under the, we have a very fundamental foreign diplomacy doctrines called shared future, right? So I think this is absolutely important. To the extent possible, we should help foreign countries, especially developing countries.
And Jeffrey, earlier you mentioned that the Mekong Cooperation Mechanism has a human health aspect. If COVID vaccine could become a new demand for all the Mekong countries, and China played a role of a provider, what will do to the public health aspect of this mechanism?
I mean, it would be, this is kind of an interesting situation where we see literally every government in the world wants this vaccine to be made, and they want everyone to take it, not just their own citizens. It's literally in everybody's self-interest because it's a virus. So that's kind of, there's a lot of self-interest there, but it's also just a public good. I think everybody just wants this to be gone. And I think that would be you know, it probably does help China's reputation. I think the river coordination commissions, that would be a nice vehicle for doing a lot of this. But, you know, public health is, you know, it's one of the areas where you do actually see people behave in a very nice way. And there's a long history of doing this, especially by sort of more developed countries like China and the U.S.
Let's also talk about another topic of the Mekong mechanism, that is water supply. So, Veneris, water flow is a big issue for all the countries along the river. China has built 11 dams on the river's upper reaches. There have been complaints that the dams disrupted the flow of water, sediment, nutrients downstream, fishing, and other resources. Do you think those complaints are justified?
This year, the Mekong country facing a serious drought compared with previous year, and there's some accusations that because of China 11 dams upstream, but there are many other factors, and I think the most reliable study and report should come from the Mekong River Commission, because this is the most legitimate organization that produced a study and report on the condition of the river, quality of the river flow, and so on. So the conclusion and from that report, the latest report, and the past 7 months, the key factor that leads to the drought of this region is the falling kind of drop in the rainfall due to the high temperatures, such as El Niño effects and so on. So there's different factors which affect the water flow in the Mekong region, and the dam is one of the factors. It's not the only factor, but one of the factors. And it's not only the dam in China. You need to examine hydropower dams in other countries, like in Laos, in Cambodia, for instance, right? So to have a more comprehensive and holistic look at this issue.
But John, do you think this issue has been handled well? Because in history, there have been clashes or even wars fighting for water resources, sharing a same waterway, like Ethiopia and Egypt. And do you think there's a big question here?
No, we're far from that. I don't think so. I don't think we're getting to that kind of that level of argument here. But I think we need to stick to the science to this. You know, the report from the American the think tank is not the only report. As the previous speakers mentioned, I think the most authoritative report on this issue got to be coming from the Commission itself, and they issued a report saying that there's a couple of reasons explaining this, and that these dams actually do contribute to regulating water flow during droughts and during flood time. So I think it's a very comprehensive issue, and I don't think it's easy to just analyzing some satellite images and you can and collect some water left data and you can reach a very conclusive result here. It has to be done by people who really know about this region, and I think nobody is more qualified than the Commission itself.
But there were reports pointing that way. Recent one issued by Eyes on Earth in Cooperation, a research and consulting company.
That's the report I'm talking about.
It published in U.S. He said he blames China's dams of reducing water flow. Do you think it might have an agenda there, or is it really a problem?
I mean, from reading this report, the face of it, I think there's a clear agenda here. This report is widely quoted in a couple of news articles. One, for example, in the Foreign Policy a journal, that report was quoted. So I think it is easily and conveniently picked up as a topic to confront China, basically, in a region that has nothing to do with the United States, I think, in my opinion. This area, is in Asia, and it's an area, it's a vibrant area of economic development involving all the countries here, including China. So I think, this issue got to be resolved among the stakeholders here. The countries here in Asia need to sit down and talk about this. And nobody should exclusively rely on this report from outside to make a conclusion, make an argument.
And Jeffrey, what is the accepted principles of using the same water resources, but from different parts.
Right. I mean, in this topic of sort of the economic integration of Southeast Asia, China, there's always the river, and rivers, like, they have very unusual politics. Everywhere you go, whether it's California or Southeast Asia, just by the nature of if one country does one thing, it affects the other country, especially if you're downstream. So you always see these sort of unusual relationships and politics around rivers. And that's going to continue to be the case for the Mekong going forward. If it's monsoon season, maybe a Chinese dam makes a change at the same time as a Lao dam makes a change, and suddenly something in Thailand floods. Right? It's all interconnected. So, you know, what the Commission, I think, is doing well is they said we're going to have a lot of data transparency. We're going to put all the data, and we're going to have a lot of conversation, because these interchanges are going to keep happening going forward. So it's a very interesting dynamic once you start talking about the river as opposed to just Southeast Asia integration.
So, Vanneris, coordination is key here. To have coordination, we have to have data, and that Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said he vowed to share hydrological data from China's section of the river. Will that prove and improve the water conservancy projects and usages of waters along the river down the road?
Transparency in information sharing, especially hydrological data, the whole year, because in the past, China did not really share much on the dry season, the data in the dry season. So this is the beginning, a good positive starting point that China agreed to share the whole year of hydrological data with the lower Mekong country, which will have to promote mutual understanding, trust between the lower and upper Mekong countries, and also help the country to coordinate floods, droughts, and other issues that involve the Mekong River. So I think this is very, very important step for China and other Mekong countries to work together to share information, build mutual trust, understanding, and develop an innovative, sustainable solution to the problem that they are facing.
And John, China is also thinking of a larger context. Premier Li said China will work with the LMC countries to establish the Lancang-Mekong River Water Resources Cooperation Information Sharing Platform.
Right.
That's not only for water use to tackle climate change, natural disasters, flood control, drought control, agricultural cooperation. Will that make a difference in the future for all the countries involved?
Of course. I think what Premier Li was talking about is not just about this management of water resource issue here. He's also talking about better economic integration, better investment from China in these countries. So I think, in a sense, this is creating, in my opinion, a little small block within the ASEAN countries, right? And China is trying to very hard to develop a relationship. And of course, the water issue is the centerpiece of that.
Because we share a very major river.
Right. So around this issue, there are also other investment opportunities. There are also other business development opportunities, economic development opportunities that all the countries can be involved to participate. So I think this is more than just about water resource management. Although this is a very important, critical leverage, but beyond that, there are many more business opportunities, economic opportunities here.
But also geopolitics is at play here. Vanneris, you earlier mentioned Japan and U.S. interest in this. We understand Japanese Foreign Minister Motegi just wrapped up a visit to Southeast Asia and pledged aid to the Mekong countries. So you see that the major countries are competing to have a pie in this part of the world, and how will Mekong countries view this and react?
Obviously, there's a certain element of geopolitical competition in the Mekong, because the Mekong region, if you look at it from a big picture perspective, is a strategic frontier of Asia, a new strategic frontier of Asia. A lot of major power involved in this region. But from the Mekong point of view, China-Japan competition is healthy competition. I mean, some extent it's good for the Mekong countries, but they don't want to see competition between U.S. and China to the level that they cannot stay neutral and independent, or sometimes they, in circumstances they are forced to choose sides. So they welcome competition, but at a level that is manageable and a healthy competition. And competition is good for the region when it comes to infrastructure development, to compete for better quality project and so on. So yes, competition is there. Yeah.
And Jeffrey, of course, America is now distracted by COVID, but how does America view the coming closure of economic and trade relations between China and the Mekong countries, which the Americans know very well? They fought a war there.
I mean, I think you can clearly see in the last 3 years that the U.S. government politically has shifted its focus from, let's say, the Middle East, squarely on Asia. I think this is where definitely the more national defense-related people are looking, but also the government. Asia is becoming a big part of what the U.S. sees as its future. And within that, there's obviously Southeast Asia, there's Japan, there's things like that. And, it's quite good if you're a country like Thailand, because you're just quite popular. China wants to work with you, Japan wants to work with you, the U.S. wants to work with you. That's not a bad scenario to be in for a relatively small country relative to those, those giants. So it's probably a healthy dynamic right now. It could become too competitive. It could become you must choose sides. We don't want to see any of that, right? But right now, I would describe it as fairly healthy.
And let's talk about China's strategy. On the economic side, the Chinese premier proposed connecting the Mekong countries with the new international land-sea trade corridor, which crosses Western China, connecting with Southeast Asia and also with Europe. That's a big connectivity initiative and vision. But COVID probably complicated that process. Where we are now?
I think COVID is a temporary phenomenon. It's going to be gone, I think. It's going to be gone because of the vaccine development and because of the, it's the natural nature of the virus itself. It's probably going to go away, in my opinion, by the end of next year. Absolutely going to be gone by the end of next year, hopefully. But the connectivity projects, the infrastructure projects, better relationship, economic relationship, trade relationship between China and these countries are going to continue. I think we're building a railway right now from into Laos, and eventually we'll go to Thailand and other countries. So I think these developments are very positive. We all know that a better connectivity, especially on the infrastructure side, will help.
But you don't think COVID will change people's thinking on connectivity and exposure to foreign and outside?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look at the Spanish flu in 1918, 1990. It killed far more people, right? It has caused far more economic mayhem among many countries around the globe. And eventually, there was a boom time of a decade right after that. So, so I don't think that the economic development force are very powerful and are very fundamental. I don't think a small a virus, even as big as it is right now, in terms of inflicting casualties around the world, would derail the economic development trajectory.
All right. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Werner. And thank you, Jeffrey, for your insights. You've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Joe in Beijing. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.